Hey guys, this is Vaughn Grow with the Dental Technicians Guild. We're very excited and pleased to announce the DTG Education channel. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, my name is Mike Dominguez, and I made a short little film here on how to stat porcelain to titanium. I use titanium porcelain for a lot of my implant work in our lab, and I have a lab in Seattle. And right now, you're looking at the University of Washington ship canal, and it's walking distance from my lab, so it's not a bad place to kind of just hang out and unwind a little bit after a long day at the bench. But I hope you enjoy the video. And first, just a few scenic shots of my town, Seattle.
People flock like cattle to Seattle after Kurt Cobain.
We live in a crazy, beautiful part of the world here in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle is just one of those towns that I feel lucky to be in, and it's always felt like home.
And one day he escaped. Do you wanna pay for this in cash? Viva Seattle, Tacoma.
Hey, look, the Space Needle.
Viva Seattle, Tacoma.
So the bonding mechanics, when it comes to porcelain bonding to metal, is the same for all alloys, including titanium. You have to deal with your oxide, which is your chemical bond. You have to deal with the way that the metal is finished, which is your mechanical bond. And then you have to worry about the coefficient of thermal expansion, which are the residual stresses. In the GC initial system, they have a titanium bonder that optimizes the oxide layer in order for porcelain to bond to the titanium. Titanium is very biocompatible. It behaves like noble alloy in terms of its elastic modulus, and it has a very high strength to weight ratio. So here's our case, and here's the abutment. As soon as it comes back, you want to check it on the model. Make sure the rotation is where it should be. Make sure the design resembles what you did on the screen. And then you might do a little bit of contouring, and then sandblast the area that you're going to apply the bonder to. So after finishing and sandblasting, you want to rinse and put it in the ultrasonic to just get rid of all the sandblast and let it sit on the bench for 5 minutes in order for it to passivate. So when you mix your powder and liquid together for your bonder, you're going to mix about a minute, and you're going to mix pretty aggressively in order to get all the granules to dissolve in the solution. Usually takes about a minute to go ahead and get yourself a nice consistency. You don't want it too runny, and you don't want it too thick. You want a nice workable solution that'll give you a nice even coverage. And then you can use your brush to apply aggressively to break the surface tension, and then you could use the brush to draw out any excess that you have near the gingival, or if this was a bridge, it would be near the connectors. Anywhere that the liquid will puddle, you can use your brush to draw out that liquid to give you a nice even coverage. So here's the biggest trick for the opaque layer is to use glaze liquid. Glaze liquid will give it a little bit more body. It's easier to handle. It's not as fluid as the opaque liquid, so it's a little thicker. But it's not a paste. It's still a powder opaque, so it does not feel like a paste. It feels close when you use your glaze liquid. But what I like to do in addition is to warm my abutment under the muffle. Just give it a little bit of heat, and what that does is it dries out your liquid, and that makes for a little bit easier to handle. So you can periodically just warm it up under the muffle. So I'll set up my porcelain tray about the same way every time. So from left to right, the powders under that first sponge is going to be my fluorescent dentin, my 2 inside powders for chroma, my 2 dentins. And then above the sponge from left to right is going to be my high value trans, my low value trans, my chromatic trans, my enamel mix, and then my occlusal enamel. And then at the very top is my cervical trans. And you'll notice that this video is sped up, so it's about 4 times speed. It would be really cool if I worked this fast. I would probably get a lot more sleep. So this is what it looks like when I first stack it, and then you got to blend it in. I'm pretty scruffy of a stacker, but when you're removing it, you want to make sure that the porcelain is a little damp. It's not too dry. If the porcelain's bone dry at this point and you try to remove it, the pink tissue could push off the abutment and then break off your dry porcelain. So just make sure that it's not bone dry. Alright, so after removing this screw, you want to go ahead and fill in where you cannot get to when the abutment was on the model. And that's going to be your inside powders that you're going to use near the gingival, and it could even be your gingival dentin if you're at that stage. So when I'm doing difficult shades, this is where I would stop just to double check where I'm at. Well, in this case we're doing an A1, A2, so it's gonna be a pretty easy shade. I probably would have gone 1 bake if I was not filming.
Sense
When I seat my contacts for implant cases, I like to leave one contact open. If I can, I'll keep the distal open. Sometimes it works out that it's the mesial. In reality, it doesn't matter. Just leave one of them open. That way you make sure that the other is seated, and then you can close the other contact at your glaze firing. So, when you're working with single anteriors anywhere in the anterior region, it's always good to identify your line angles, especially to the tooth that you're trying to match in terms of width, where your line angles are, and where they're headed, where they're pointing. It also gives you a chance to kind of just compare the two spaces and where those line angles are going to need to be if the spaces are not equal. Like if you're trying to hide a larger space, or if you try to make a smaller space look wider. It's all playing with your line angles. Line angles, identifying them, also provides you with a nice little canvas on where you're going to put your facial anatomy, where your height of contour is, where your smooth textures are going to contrast with your rough textures.
Solitude is all this hobo life may set you straight.
Alright, so I have to confess, I probably should have changed this rubber wheel when I was filming this, but do you ever get to that last part of the wheel and you just tell yourself, I can finish this case, I don't need to get a new wheel? I didn't finish this case with that wheel. I ended up having to get a new wheel, but it served its purpose, and essentially all I was doing is smoothing out the areas that need to be smooth, the interproximal areas, the incisal edge, and this wheel that you just saw, the big pillow wheel, it's a fairly aggressive wheel, and it adds a nice worn look to a tooth, like an older tooth with old pericommata. And then I just do a nice pre-polish to smooth out my line angles so they're not too jagged. And then here's what I'm adding to my interproximal contact before I glaze. So in order to remove the oxide layer off the area where we're not stacking porcelain, we use 50 micron sand and less than 2 bars, and it takes it right off. It's a real fragile oxide layer, and so the best way to remove it is with sandblast. As far as the emergence polishing, I start with a gray wheel. Any anatomy that I need to polish, I'll use a rubber point. And then when I'm finished with all that, I'll go to a high shine wheel, and then the last step is a Robinson brush with Renfort's polishing paste, and it puts a nice sheen on it. And then after that, you're done. Alright, so just to recap, we talked a little bit about the oxide layer and how important it is to use a TI bonder in order to optimize your oxide layer. Using a cross-cut carbide burr for metal finishing will prevent you from folding the metal over itself, and then it's the residual stresses are sort of just taken care of for you because titanium, the CTE is pretty much the same in any titanium that you're going to get, so your porcelain should line up well in terms of the residual stresses. I really hope you enjoyed this film, and I hope that you got something out of it. Here are a few cases that we've done with titanium porcelain and other applications that we've used it with. So, best of luck to all of you.